Six demons, 67 exorcisms, one horrifying true story. In 1970s Bavaria, a devout young woman named Anneliese Michel began a descent into nightmare. Raised in a strict Catholic family, she embraced penance with unnerving fervor, sleeping on a cold stone floor in winter to atone for sinners. But beneath her piety lurked a gathering darkness. Neighbors in her quiet village would soon whisper of unholy screams echoing from the Michel home. This is the true horror of Anneliese Michel's exorcism, a tale of faith and terror colliding in the modern world, where an ordinary 16-year-old girl's life became a battleground between hope and unspeakable evil. Anneliese's ordeal began quietly, with a sudden seizure at age 16. One crisp day in 1968, she collapsed at school, and later that night awoke unable to move or cry out. An invisible weight pinned her to the bed. Her chest heaved under a crushing pressure. She gasped, paralyzed, eyes wide in terror as if a dark figure straddled her. For long seconds, she lay rigid, suffocating on silence. When the force finally released, Anneliese found she had wet the bed in fear. Doctors later diagnosed these episodes as temporal lobe epilepsy, but to the frightened teenager, it felt like a demonic presence held her in place. Though the attack subsided, a sense of dread clung to Anneliese, a silent warning of the greater horror yet to come. After that night, Anneliese's life slowly shifted from ordinary to ominous. Over the next few years, she became tormented by terrifying visions and voices. While praying, she began to see demonic, grimacing faces sneering at her from the shadows. She heard a cruel voice whisper that she was damned and would rot in hell, an accusation that echoed ceaselessly in her mind. Her behavior changed drastically. Once a friendly college student, she grew withdrawn and sullen, lashing out in sudden rages. Depression wrapped around her, heavy and cold, until she told loved ones, "My will is not my own. Someone else is manipulating me." Anneliese became convinced she was beyond salvation, even warning others that the end of the world was near. In secret, she confided that she could sense a vile presence clinging to her. At times, a nauseating stench of something burning or rotting would surround her, inexplicable to anyone else. Family and friends watched in alarm as this once devout girl came to believe dark forces had marked her soul. In 1973, a desperate attempt at holy relief only deepened the fear. Anneliese joined a pilgrimage to a religious shrine in San Damiano, Italy, hoping for peace, but finding terror. She could not cross the threshold of the sacred place. As she later described, the soil burned like fire beneath her feet. An unseen force repelled her from the chapel. She cowered outside, unable to gaze upon the image of Christ inside. An older woman accompanying her noticed something was terribly wrong. Anneliese's body trembled, and a foul, hellish odor seemed to emanate from her. The girl refused even a sip from the holy spring. Onlookers whispered that she acted possessed, and in that moment a chilling realization dawned. This was not mere illness. As others knelt in prayer, Anneliese stood at a distance, eyes averting the crucifix as if it seared her very soul. The church had strict criteria for demonic possession, aversion to sacred objects, and unnatural strength or knowledge. And Anneliese was now exhibiting the first unmistakable signs. The faithful friend who witnessed this was convinced the devil's hand was on Anneliese, and the frightened young woman returned home with shadows trailing in her footsteps. Back in Germany, the Michel family sought help from the church as Anneliese's conditions spiraled downward. They pleaded with priests to perform an exorcism, but initially met resistance. Clergy advised more medical treatment, noting that a formal exorcism required a bishop's approval and solid evidence of possession. Meanwhile, home life had become a waking nightmare. Anneliese's behavior grew violently erratic. She would snarl and attack family members without warning, then harm herself in disgraceful ways. In trances, she injured herself, compulsively drank her own urine, and even ate insects off the floor. Prayer had once comforted her, but now she could barely stand the sight of a crucifix, and when forced, her body writhed as if scalded by holy water. Her mother, Anna, claimed to witness mysterious stigmata wounds on Anneliese's hands, bleeding marks resembling Christ's crucifixion wounds. Neighbors heard unearthly screams at night and thuds of struggle. Medical doctors tried higher doses of antipsychotic drugs and anticonvulsants, but nothing quelled the storm inside her. Each day brought a new blasphemous outburst or frightening contortion, strengthening the family's belief that something far beyond mental illness tormented their daughter. By late 1974, desperation set in. Traditional medicine had failed, and the Michels begged the church once more, "Please, help us. Our child is suffering." At last, a glimmer of hope flickered in the darkness. Father Ernst Alt, a local priest, took a special interest in Anneliese's case. In 1975, after meeting the 22-year-old, he noted with concern that she didn't look like an epileptic, and that something more uncanny might be at play. Anneliese confided in Father Alt through letters, revealing the depth of her despair. "I am nothing. Everything about me is vanity. You pray for me," she wrote, and in another moment of clarity she pleaded, "I want to suffer for other people. But this is so cruel." These haunting words from the tormented young woman convinced Father Alt that her battle was spiritual as much as medical. He and another experienced exorcist, Father Adolf Rodewyk, compiled evidence and pressed the Bishop of Würzburg for permission to perform the church's ancient exorcism rite. After careful deliberation, Bishop Joseph Stangl gave his consent in September 1975. The major rite of exorcism, according to the Rituale Romanum of 1614, was approved, but under strict secrecy. With the church's sanction finally secured, Father Alt and Father Arnold Renz prepared to confront whatever evil had taken hold of Anneliese. The stage was set for a battle of wills, two determined priests armed with faith, and a young woman caught between salvation and the abyss. On a late September day in 1975, the first exorcism session began inside the Michel's own home. The air was thick with incense and dread as Fathers Renz and Alt stood over a weakened yet defiant Anneliese. Latin prayers rang out in a steady drone. "Exorcizo te, immundissim spiritus," their voices firm, commanding the demons to depart. At first, Anneliese remained eerily still, eyes shut. Then, with a guttural howl, she erupted. Her body convulsed with such violence that family members had to help hold her down to prevent injury. She thrashed and snarled in a deep, rasping voice that hardly sounded human. As holy water was sprinkled on her forehead, Anneliese let out a blood-curdling scream, a sound no one present would ever forget. Witnesses would later describe her countenance under possession as twisted and unrecognizable, lips pulled back in a feral grin, and eyes black with rage. During calmer moments, the priests tested the entity by reciting prayers silently or using ordinary water. In one instance, Father Renz prepared unmarked bottles, some filled with holy water, others with tap water. And without knowing which was which, Anneliese reacted violently only to the truly holy water, recoiling and hissing when it touched her skin. To the priests, this was a chilling confirmation of a genuine demonic presence. These early battles were exhausting, sometimes lasting up to 4 hours of continuous prayer and struggle. Yet, it was only the beginning. With each rite, Anneliese's screams grew louder, and the evil within her seemed to burrow deeper, entrenching itself for a prolonged fight. As the exorcisms continued through fall and winter, the entities tormenting Anneliese began to reveal themselves. During one harrowing session, Father Renz demanded, "Name yourselves." In response, Anneliese's lips pulled back, and a chorus of low voices boomed from her throat, growling an infamous litany of names. Lucifer, Cain, Judas, Nero, even Adolf Hitler, and a disgraced priest called Fleischmann. Those present shuddered as each identity emerged, distinct and snarling. Sometimes the demons argued amongst themselves, using Anneliese's body as their battleground, guttural voices taunting and bickering in terrifying dialogue. On one tape recording, a demon claiming to be Hitler spat out, "People are stupid as pigs. They think it's all over after death." It goes on. Another voice, haughty and bitter, identified itself as Judas and mocked Hitler as a powerless big mouth in the fires of hell. Lucifer's presence announced itself with pride and contempt for humanity, while the spirit of Judas howled of eternal damnation. These exchanges sent chills through the priests and family. The living room in Klingenberg had become an arena of cosmic horror. Each demon spoke in coarse German or Latin, languages Anneliese knew, though in a twisted, mocking tone. The demon voices that emanated from this frail young woman's body were so feral and unearthly that one observer likened them to the sound of the Exorcist film, except this was not fiction. By candlelight they continued the ritual, priests pressing onward even as the entities spewed blasphemies and laughter. Every answered question, every demonic rant about human sin or church corruption only convinced the exorcists further that they were truly confronting demonic intelligences using Anneliese as their mouthpiece. Between exorcism sessions, Anneliese's nightmarish behavior escalated to shocking extremes. The once reserved university student became almost feral. She would tear off her clothes and urinate on the kitchen floor, then lick her own urine up like a beast. For days on end, she crawled under tables, barking like a dog at anyone who came near. Family members would awaken at 2 a.m. to find Anneliese squeezing herself into a gap under a dresser, growling and gnashing her teeth in the darkness. She caught and ate flies and spiders with her bare hands, and on one ghastly occasion even bit the head off a dead bird she found outside. Coal from the furnace became a snack for her. She chewed on pieces of charcoal until her teeth cracked. In her few lucid moments, Anneliese wept at what was happening to her, but said the demons wouldn't let her stop. Sleep became a rarity. She only managed an hour or two on some nights, spending the rest of the time running through the house, praying or screaming to an unseen tormentor for mercy. Holy objects stood no chance around her. She smashed crucifixes, tore rosary beads, and shredded any image of Christ or the saints within reach. She performed hundreds of genuflections, kneeling prayers, obsessively each day, 400 to 600 bows, rising and collapsing to her knees over and over until the joints swelled black and blue. The house itself seemed to groan under the strain of these rituals and ravings. By now, Anneliese's once bright face was sunken and bruised, her eyes often rolled back into her skull, and her voice could flip from pitiful pleas to monstrous roars in an instant. No horror film could match the living reality that unfolded daily in the Michel household, a young woman's body used as a grotesque playground for unseen evil. By the spring of 1976, Anneliese was utterly exhausted, teetering at the brink of life and death. Yet she believed there was meaning in her suffering. She spoke repeatedly of a grim purpose, that she must die to atone for the wayward youth and priests of the modern age. In her tortured mind, she was a martyr in a war against evil, and the demons infesting her were the price of redemption for others. This conviction drove her to refuse food entirely. She claimed the demons would not allow her to eat, and so day after day she consumed nothing, despite pleas from her family. On rare occasions, if she tried to eat, she would vomit or feel a choking sensation. As weeks passed, her weight plummeted. The once healthy 20-year-old wasted away to a skeletal frame of approximately 30 kilograms. her cheeks hollowed, skin stretched pale and tight over bone. She was frequently feverish and weak. At one point, she likely developed pneumonia as her immune system failed. Still, Anneliese insisted the exorcisms must continue, forbidding her parents from seeking hospital care. The priests, too, focused solely on the rites, sometimes reminding themselves that according to the old ritual guidelines, concern for the body was secondary to saving the soul. Unbeknownst to anyone, Anneliese was now racing against time. With each passing day of starvation, her heartbeat grew fainter and her body began to literally break down. Her knee joints cracked from all the relentless kneeling until she could no longer walk without assistance. Bruises and sores covered her limbs, and yet, frail and dying as she was, Anneliese persevered with a strange light in her eyes, believing that through this unthinkable ordeal, her soul and others might ultimately be saved. June 30th, 1976, the day of the final exorcism, arrived with a heavy stillness. Anneliese was by now bedridden, her once raven hair matted and her breath labored. A small group gathered for one last attempt to expel the demons. Father Renz began the rite for the 67th time, intoning prayers over the barely conscious girl. She could scarcely speak, each word a rasp. Yet, as the ritual neared its climax, Anneliese opened her eyes and, in a clear moment of lucidity, uttered a final request. Looking to the priest, she whispered, "Please, absolution." It was a plea for forgiveness, the concluding part of the rite, which she desperately wanted to receive. Father Renz gently granted her the absolution prayer. Moments later, Anneliese turned to her mother, who was kneeling at her bedside, and with trembling lips managed to say, "Mama, stay with me. I am afraid." These would be her last words. As night fell, a thunderstorm rumbled in the distance, rain lashing the windows. The final battle had been waged, and an eerie calm settled over Anneliese's room. According to the priests, the demons had at long last been cast out, leaving Anneliese in a state of profound peace. Exhausted and drained, the family kept vigil by candlelight, praying that their daughter would survive till morning. The house that night felt strangely quiet, the first true silence in many months, as if the darkness itself was holding its breath. On the morning of July 1st, 1976, a dawn of unnerving silence fell over the Anneliese's household. Anneliese Michel gently opened her daughter's bedroom door with a tray of tea, only to find Anneliese lying motionless, her face pale and serene. Panicked, Anna rushed to her side, calling her name, but Anneliese did not stir. Sometime in the early hours, Anneliese Michel had died, finally escaping the horrors that plagued her. She was only 23. The official autopsy later listed the cause as severe malnutrition and dehydration. Essentially, she starved to death after nearly a year of demonic torment and self-neglect. The coroner noted that her body was riddled with damage, bruises on every limb, fractured teeth, and both knees shattered from endless genuflections. At barely 30 kilograms in weight, she looked like a wraith, sunken-eyed and bone-thin. Yet in death, her face appeared oddly at peace. The terror that once contorted her features was gone, leaving only a faint, sorrowful smile, as if she knew her sacrifice was over. For her parents, the scene was both heartbreaking and, in a tragic way, a release. The demonic screaming had ceased. After months of battling what they believed was literal hell, their beloved daughter's body lay quiet and free. Outside the window, the morning sun broke through charcoal clouds, shining on the crucifix above Anneliese's bed. The long night had ended, but the true impact of Anneliese's story was only beginning to dawn on the world beyond Klingenberg. News of Anneliese's death and the circumstances leading to it spread quickly, shocking Germany and the world. A police investigation ensued, followed by charges against her parents and the two priests for negligent homicide. The case went to trial in 1978, transforming Anneliese's private hell into a public spectacle. In the courtroom, a stark contrast played out. Doctors testified that Anneliese's condition was a mix of epilepsy and psychological disturbance, exacerbated by her intense religious environment. They argued that her symptoms, from voices to aversion of holy objects, could be explained by medical science, and that no supernatural forces were needed to account for her behavior. But the priests and family stood firm in their belief that literal demons had been at work. To bolster their case, the defense shocked the court by playing some of the actual exorcism audio tapes. In the wood-paneled courtroom, those present heard the chilling cacophony of Anneliese's recorded voice, switching from her own soft-spoken tone to multiple low, growling personas trading blasphemies. Journalists and jurors listened with unease as the tapes captured what sounded like demons arguing inside the young woman. The priest testified that 6 specific demons had identified themselves: Lucifer, Cain, Judas Iscariot, Nero, Adolf Hitler, and the fallen priest Fleischmann, and that after the final rite, Anneliese had been freed at last. It was a bizarre and gripping trial, pitting faith against reason. In the end, the court found the defendants guilty of negligent homicide, noting that medical intervention a week before could have saved her life. However, sympathizing with the parents' suffering, the judge imposed relatively mild sentences: 6 months in prison, later suspended, and 3 years probation. The trial's verdict did little to settle the central question of the case. Instead, it left an unnerving question dangling in the public consciousness. Had this been a tragic misdiagnosis of mental illness, or had an ancient darkness truly manifested in a modern girl's life? In the aftermath, Anneliese Michel's story took on a life of its own. To some, she became a tragic symbol of religious fervor gone wrong, a cautionary tale urging compassion for mental illness. To others, especially pockets of traditionalist Catholics, Anneliese was venerated as a spiritual heroine who had faced real demons and suffered to redeem others. Her grave in Klingenberg quietly turned into a pilgrimage site, with visitors leaving notes of thanks and prayers on her tombstone. Even decades later, buses of the faithful arrived, singing hymns by her grave and treating her as an unofficial saint who atoned for the sins of her generation. In 1978, her parents had Anneliese's remains exhumed and reinterred in a more sturdy coffin, amid rumors that her body might not have decayed normally, though official reports confirmed it did. Anneliese's mother, in a rare interview years later, said she did not regret the path they took, insisting, "I know we did the right thing. I saw the sign of Christ in her hands." To this day, Anna Michel maintains that the stigmata on Anneliese's body were proof of divine purpose, not madness. The house where it all happened stood for decades as a quiet monument to the ordeal. Strangely, in 2013, a fire gutted the long-vacant Michel family home. Police ruled it an arson by vandals, but locals whispered that perhaps the evil tied to the exorcism had never really left, and the flames were its final protest. The Anneliese Michel case prompted the Catholic Church to reevaluate its exorcism practices, emphasizing medical evaluations, a small solace that maybe no one would endure such a fate again. Yet the haunting legacy of Anneliese lives on, in films, books, and the persistent shiver that her recordings send down the spine of anyone who dares to listen. Her story remains a stark reminder that in the late 20th century, in a quiet German town, the line between psychological horror and supernatural evil became dangerously blurred. Anneliese Michel's ordeal has become one of the most disturbing true horror stories of our times, not because of spinning heads or Hollywood theatrics, but because of its raw reality. Her voice, at times pleading, "I am afraid," at times growling with inhuman rage, survives on tape, a chilling testament to what she endured. Listening, one cannot easily dismiss the sense of ancient darkness that seems to crackle in the background of those recordings. And yet, her gentle last plea, "Please, absolution," hints at an unwavering faith amid utter terror. The story of Anneliese Michel forces us to confront questions that have no easy answers. Was she a devout woman tragically let down by those who saw demons instead of diagnosing disease? Or did she, in fact, stand off against genuine demonic forces, her suffering a battleground between good and evil? Perhaps it is both, the horror lying in how indistinguishable the two realms can become in the depths of a troubled mind. In the end, all that is left is a quiet gravestone and hours of harrowing audio, relics of a young life cut short. But the resonance of Annaliese's story endures, a memento mori whispered on cold winds. Sometimes the scariest stories are not written by screenwriters or novelists. They are lived, painfully and courageously, by people like Anneliese. Her tale remains a caution and a mystery, a dark chronicle of faith, fear, and the unknown that will continue to unsettle all who hear it, long after the last candle has burned out. Cairo Tales, thanks for watching. Subscribe. Follow for new horror stories. Leave comment.